Rain dotted the sleek black windows of the uptown Charlotte bistro as soft jazz floated over hushed conversations. Caroline Whitaker sat at a table near the window, back straight, perfectly tailored blazer crisp against the plush velvet seat. The dim lighting kissed the edges of her face, casting soft shadows over high cheekbones and a sharp jawline. Everything about her said power, command, control. Except for the wheelchair beneath her. She adjusted the cuff of her white blouse, checked her phone again. 7:12. He was 12 minutes late. Her assistant, Janelle, had insisted this guy Rick was different, not intimidated by strong women, not superficial. He's a grown man, not a boy in a blazer, she'd said with a wink, sending Caroline off with too much hope and a too tight smile. Caroline breathed in deeply, scanning the restaurant. Couples. Wine glasses raised. Two women toasted something over oysters. A family of 3 across the room leaned in over dessert. A flicker of envy brushed her chest and vanished before she could examine it. Then she saw him. Tall, tan trench coat, salt and pepper hair slicked back. Rick. He paused near the entrance, spotted her, and smiled. Caroline lifted a hand slightly. His smile faded. She watched it happen the moment he saw the chair. The subtle shift. The calculations behind his eyes. Rick approached slowly. He stopped just short of the table, cleared his throat, and said, "Caroline." "Yes." She smiled, calm, practiced. "Nice to finally meet you." He didn't sit. He glanced at the chair, then back at her face, as if searching for a punchline. "You look different than your photo," he said flatly. Caroline blinked, keeping the smile fixed. "This wasn't in your profile," Rick added, gesturing vaguely toward the chair. "No," she replied, voice steady. "Should it have been?" He didn't answer. The silence stretched. Then, abruptly, "Listen, I just don't think I'm prepared for this kind of situation. It's not what I expected. I'm sorry." He turned and walked out. No raised voice. No scene. Just a quiet exit, leaving her sitting alone beneath golden chandeliers, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. Caroline swallowed hard, eyes stinging. Her hands rested on the wheels, trembling slightly. She could feel the burn of glances from nearby tables, the way people pretend not to stare, but do. The way pity stains the air, heavier than spilled wine. "Some people," a voice said gently nearby, "don't know what they're missing until it's long gone." She turned. A man in a blue maintenance uniform stood beside her table, holding a folded white napkin in his hand. His face was kind, dark, brown eyes, soft but steady. Mid-40s, close-cut hair, clean-shaven, calm presence. A name stitched in white over his chest, Marcus. "I wasn't eavesdropping," he added quickly, setting the napkin down. "Just saw what happened. Figured you might want a clean start." Caroline stared at him. For once, words didn't come easily. He didn't rush her. "Don't let people like that make you question your worth," Marcus said. "You deserve better." He gave a quiet nod, then walked away, pushing his janitor cart toward the back hallway. And just like that, the room felt a little less suffocating. The next morning, Caroline's office on the 34th floor was silent, except for the hum of glass windows battling the wind outside. She sat at her desk, tapping through emails, her mind replaying the night like a broken record. Rick's expression. The awkward pause. Marcus's voice. "You deserve better." She stared out at the skyline. Charlotte was waking up people in suits, weaving between traffic lights, coffee in hand, power meetings on their minds. She was one of them, had been for years, CEO of Whitaker Capital, the firm her father once ran, now hers alone. People respected her, feared her, even. She built this empire brick by calculated brick. Yet the higher she rose, the smaller her world became. Janelle buzzed in. "Board meeting at 9. Want coffee? Strong, Caroline answered. She wheeled herself toward the window. Her reflection ghosted back at her. Power suit, perfect makeup, clean lines. But beneath it, emptiness. She didn't cry about last night. That wasn't her way. Instead, she filed it with all the other disappointments. Men who saw the chair first. Or only. Dates that turned awkward when she refused to apologize for being disabled, for being more than what they expected. Her phone buzzed again. Janelle again. Also reminder. Property management has someone cleaning the floors this week. Might cross paths in the lobby. Caroline paused. Blue uniform. Marcus. By 8:30. She was in the lobby. Earlier than usual. Coffee in hand, eyes scanning the tiled floor like she was looking for cracks that weren't there. And then she saw him. Marcus, in the same blue uniform, was polishing the brass edging near the elevators. Focused, careful, moving with intention. She hesitated, then rolled toward him. He noticed her but didn't speak first, just nodded politely. "Hey," she said, more casual than she felt. "Thanks for last night." He looked up. "You're welcome." "I didn't get your name." "Marcus." She extended her hand. "Caroline." He shook it. His grip was firm but warm. They stood there a moment, surrounded by lobby music and hurried footsteps. "You always this smooth with strangers?" she asked, half a smile forming. Marcus shrugged. "Not usually. But you look like someone who could use a kind word." "That obvious?" "Not obvious," he said. "Just human." The elevator chimed behind her. She didn't move. "I'm usually in early finds," she said, almost to herself. "Quiet's good for thinking." "Same," Marcus said. "Most people ignore me. You didn't." The elevator chimed again, doors trying to close, then opening once more. She smiled this time. "Well, you're hard to ignore." With a nod, she turned and rolled into the elevator. As the doors slid shut, she caught a glimpse of him back to polishing, focused again. But this time, she wasn't thinking about Rick. She was thinking about the man who saw her last night and didn't look away. Upstairs. Janelle looked up as Caroline entered. "Everything okay?" "Yes," Caroline replied, rolling past her assistant. "Everything's fine." But her voice held a warmth it hadn't in a long time. As she settled behind her desk, she opened a blank document. No charts. No metrics. Just a blinking cursor waiting for something real. She typed, "You deserve better." And for once, she believed it. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me, either way. The morning light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows in Caroline's office, casting geometric patterns across the polished floor. Charlotte stretched beyond the glass, sharp and alive. Yet it all felt distant, like a painting hung behind glass. Beautiful but untouchable. She sat at her desk, motionless, staring at the half-written sentence on her screen. "You deserve better." Her fingers hovered over the keys, then pulled back. "Better than what?" she whispered to the empty room. Janelle walked in without knocking, a tablet in one hand and a sense of urgency trailing behind her. "Caroline, the quarterly projection numbers are coming in light. Do you want to pivot messaging before the board sees them?" Caroline blinked, snapping out of whatever trance she was in. "Push the strategic memo until after lunch. I'll review the raw data first." "You're not seriously going to rewrite the whole thing?" Janelle asked, arching a brow. "I'm not seriously going to let a room full of men in cufflinks tell me how to spin my own numbers." A pause, then a smile. "There she is," Janelle said, tapping her screen. Caroline offered a small smile in return, but her mind wasn't really on profits or margins. Not today. After Janelle left, she wheeled back from her desk and stared out the window again. Yesterday's rejection still hung in the corners of her thoughts like fog refusing to lift, but it wasn't Rick she was replaying. It was Marcus. His voice, the steadiness of it, the way he didn't look away from her, the way he didn't pity her. That alone made him a rarity. Caroline shook her head. What was she doing? Entertaining thoughts about a man she didn't know, who worked maintenance, who probably had no idea who she really was. She didn't even know if he was married, or dating, or just kind because he was raised right. Still, something had shifted in her, and she didn't know how to shift it back. Later that afternoon, Caroline's private elevator opened into the building lobby, quiet, except for the rhythmic squeak of wheels and the faint hum of fluorescent lighting. She wasn't in a rush. Not today. She rolled past the tall marble columns and paused when she caught sight of Marcus at the far end of the hallway, kneeling near the baseboards, scrubbing at a scuff mark like it mattered more than half the meetings she'd sat through this week. She wasn't planning to stop. She really wasn't. But her wheels did anyway. Dedicated, she said lightly. Marcus looked up, then smiled. You'd be surprised how much character you can read from floor scuffs. Is that right? He stood, wiping his hands on a cloth tucked in his belt. The messy ones always track dirt. The impatient ones drag their heels. The anxious ones walk circles. And me? She asked, folding her hands in her lap. Marcus tilted his head, thoughtful. Yours are clean, deliberate, quiet, like you. Caroline wasn't sure how to respond to that. Compliments from strangers usually slid off her like rain on glass. This one stuck. You've got a poetic streak, she said. He shrugged. My daughter says I talk too much. You have a daughter? Sadie, 8, artist in training. Opinions stronger than most grown adults. Something in his voice softened when he said her name. Pride. Warmth. Caroline felt a small ache rise unexpectedly. She sounds pretty great. She is. Talks non-stop. Paints on the walls when she thinks I'm not looking. Thinks everyone deserves second chances. Caroline looked at him more closely. You're not what I expected. Marcus laughed. Most people expect someone pushing a mop to be invisible. She tilted her head. Do you think I see you? I think, he hesitated, choosing his words with care. You're used to people looking through you. Same way I am. The truth in that hit harder than she liked. An elevator dinged behind them, a cue to end the moment, but neither of them moved. I'm heading out early, she said. Too many emails. Not enough oxygen. Fresh air helps, Marcus offered. So does conversation. Caroline considered him. You always like talking to CEOs? He grinned. Only the ones who talk back. She rolled out into the parking garage, hot, uncomfortably light. What was she doing? Flirting with a man she barely knew? There were rules to this life, expectations. Dating was already complicated. Adding class difference to it, that wasn't just difficult. It was asking for disappointment. Still, for the first time in a long time, she wanted to break the rules. Meanwhile, 30 minutes later, in a modest red brick house on the edge of Eastover, Marcus was trying to reheat leftover meatloaf while Sadie narrated the plot of a dream she had involving a giraffe, 3 cupcakes, and a talking sofa. Daddy, do you know the lady at your work with the cool wheels? He looked over, startled. What lady? The one in the fancy jacket, with the smile. She said hi to you yesterday. Caroline, you saw her? Yeah. She smiled at me. She looks like a superhero in her chair. Can I draw her? Marcus set the plate down. Sadie's drawings always meant something, and when she said someone looked like a superhero, it wasn't casual flattery, it was an invitation. Sure, he said, ruffling her hair. Make sure she has laser eyes or something. No, she doesn't need powers. She already looked powerful. Marcus stared at his daughter. Yeah, that sounded about right. Back at Whitaker Capital, Caroline sat at her kitchen island with a glass of red wine, untouched. Her penthouse was sleek and cold, perfect surfaces, curated art, every detail designed to impress. But none of it felt like home. Not anymore. She opened her laptop, scrolled through emails, ignored most. Then, without thinking, she searched the building directory. Marcus Hayes. No social media. No background info. Just a name. A department. A shift schedule. Her finger hovered over the tab before she closed the laptop softly. For a woman who ran million-dollar meetings, she suddenly felt completely out of her depth. But for the first time in years, that didn't scare her. It intrigued her. And that was something. Sadie sat cross-legged on the living room rug, her tongue poking out in concentration as she dragged a blue crayon across the thick construction paper. Around her were scattered markers, broken bits of colored pencils, and two half-finished drawings of horses in space helmets. Marcus stirred the soup on the stove, listening as her humming filled the room. "Daddy?" she called, without looking up. "Yeah, baby. What's her name?" He turned from the stove. "Who?" "The lady. With the wheels. The one you were talking to the other morning." Marcus paused. "Her name's Caroline." Sadie beamed, satisfied. "That's a fancy name. Like a princess name. She looks like a princess. A very smart princess," Marcus said. "She runs the building." Sadie's eyes widened. "She's the boss?" "The big boss." "Cool." Sadie turned back to her paper. She smiled at me when I waved. Not like a fake smile. Like a real one. Marcus watched his daughter quietly. There were things she picked up on that most adults missed entirely. The real and the pretend. The weight someone carried in their shoulders. The way silence could sometimes say more than words. She hadn't had an easy start in life, and in many ways, she was still healing too, but there was a light in her that made you believe in things again. Sadie held up her drawing. "Can I give this to her?" Marcus walked over and knelt beside her. The drawing showed 3 stick figures. One with a long dark ponytail in a wheelchair, wearing a crown. One tall one with a name tag that read D.A.D. and one little figure with pigtails and stars in her eyes. "She's a superhero princess boss," Sadie said proudly. "And that's me and you." He smiled, feeling a knot in his throat he didn't expect. "She'll love it." Caroline rolled into the office just before 8 the next morning, not because she had a meeting, but because something in her had started craving the early stillness of the lobby, the quiet before the city roared awake. She wasn't expecting to see Marcus. But there he was, adjusting the planter by the front glass doors, humming something under his breath. He looked up, surprised but not startled. "Early bird again," he said, straightening. Caroline glanced around. "Guilty. The silence helps me think." "Me too. Noise messes with the mop rhythm." She laughed, unexpectedly. "I never considered mop rhythm before." "It's a real thing," he said with mock seriousness. "You throw it off, and suddenly you're cleaning in circles." Caroline's smile lingered longer than she meant it to. "I'd hate to be responsible for uneven floors. You're already responsible for most of the building." "Don't remind me." He paused, then stepped closer. I have something for you." Her brow lifted. "Oh." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a folded piece of thick paper, slightly crinkled, covered in bright crayon colors. "My daughter made this. She saw you last week. Said you reminded her of a superhero." Caroline took the paper and unfolded it slowly. The moment hit her in the chest before she could prepare for it. 3 figures, clearly her with wheels, a crown, and stars in her hair. Marcus beside her. And a child she didn't know but already felt tethered to. "She drew me," Caroline whispered. "She sees people exactly as they are," Marcus said. "No filters, no assumptions. She sees strength," Caroline murmured, still staring at the drawing. "Even when most people just see the chair." "That's what makes her special," Marcus said. "She doesn't see the chair. She sees the person using it. Caroline swallowed hard. There was something achingly pure about it. Something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. "She's a remarkable little girl," she said finally. "She's everything," Marcus said. And in that moment, she saw it how deep his love ran, how much had been sacrificed to give that little girl joy. A silence passed between them. Not uncomfortable, just full. Then a voice cut through the stillness. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Caroline turned as Reed approached, briefcase in one hand, coffee in the other, his tone deceptively light. "Good morning," she said. Reed nodded to Marcus with a polite, if slightly cool, smile. "You're Marcus," he said, offering a hand. Reed took it with the kind of grip meant to assert quiet authority. "I'm Caroline's brother, legal counsel for Whitaker Capital." Caroline's jaw tightened. She knew that tone, the one Reed used when he wanted to remind people which rung of the ladder they belonged on. Marcus didn't flinch. "Nice to meet you." Reed's gaze flicked to the drawing still in Caroline's hands. "Art class?" "From Marcus's daughter," Caroline replied, her voice deliberately even. "She made it for me." Reed gave a tight smile. "Charming." Then to Caroline, quieter. "Can I talk to you upstairs?" "Later," she said, more firmly than he expected. He hesitated, clearly not used to being dismissed. "Of course." Another glance at Marcus. "Enjoy your morning." As he walked away, Marcus let out a breath. That was subtle. "Reed thinks he's everyone's big brother," Caroline said, slipping the drawing into her bag. "Protective to a fault." Marcus raised an eyebrow. Didn't feel like protection. Felt like measurement. She gave him a long look. "You get used to people measuring you when you've spent your life trying to prove you're more than what they expect." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time someone saw you as you are, not what you represent." Caroline blinked. That's when it happened. A shift. Small, quiet, but permanent. Her defenses, always stacked high like glass towers, tilted slightly, just enough for someone to peek through. "I should get to work," she said softly. "I'll be around," he replied. She turned her chair toward the elevators, the hum of the lobby settling again behind her. But the drawing burned like a heartbeat in her bag. And Marcus Hayes had become more than a stranger with a kind face. He was a question she didn't yet know how to answer. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The following morning, Caroline rolled into the building earlier than usual. The sky over Charlotte was still waking up, blushing with pinks and soft oranges. She didn't have any early meetings, no urgent fires to put out. She just wanted to be there, wanted to see if he was. Marcus was already in the lobby, mop in hand, earbuds tucked under his cap. The space around him was still and freshly cleaned, like a stage waiting for the actors to arrive. She paused at the edge of the hallway, watching him move. There was something methodical about his routine, a kind of peace in the rhythm of it. "Back to destroy the mop rhythm again?" she called out. He turned, smile immediate. "Depends." "You here to help or sabotage?" She rolled closer, sipping her coffee. "Strictly sabotage." He chuckled and tucked the mop aside, pulling out one of his earbuds. "Let me guess. Another early board meeting?" "Nope." "Market crash?" "Not yet." "Personal vendetta?" She grinned. "Definitely that." They stood in a bubble of calm, the quiet hum of the lobby building around them. "I liked the drawing," she said, voice a little softer now. "I keep it on my desk." Marcus tilted his head. "Sadie will be thrilled. She asked if you liked the crown. I think it's my favorite part. She says only powerful women get crowns and cookies." Caroline laughed, then paused. "Does she draw a lot?" "Constantly. On paper, on walls, on the dog if I let her." "You have a dog?" "No. Just making sure you're still listening." She shook her head. Unbelievable. I've got jokes, Marcus said, leaning casually against the wall. Helps when your audience is 8 and thinks knock-knock jokes are high art. There was a beat of silence between them, the kind that felt like it stretched longer than it actually was. Something unsaid hovered in the space. Do you ever miss it? Caroline asked suddenly. Marcus blinked. Miss what? Finance. The suits. The corner office. He glanced down at his uniform. You mean before I traded it all in for floor wax and juice boxes? She nodded. Yeah, that. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked out toward the glass doors, as if the answer might be written in the sky. I used to think I needed the title, he said slowly. The paycheck, the approval, all the external stuff that says, you made it. And now, I think, I just want to come home to someone who's glad I'm there. Be the reason a little girl feels safe in the world. Caroline swallowed hard. That's more than most people figure out, she said. He looked at her. What about you? What about me? Do you ever miss who you were before? The question hit deeper than she expected. Before the accident, before the wheelchair, before everything felt like a compromise. She looked down at her hands resting on the wheels. Every day, she said quietly. How then? I don't miss walking. I miss being seen, being touched, without hesitation. I miss not wondering if every smile is forced or every compliment is filtered through pity. Marcus's expression softened. You think that's what people see? She met his eyes. Isn't it? I don't, he said. The words hung in the air between them. Simple, unflinching. Before she could answer, the sound of small, rapid footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Daddy! Caroline turned as a small whirlwind in a pink backpack flew into Marcus's legs and hugged him tightly. Sadie, school's closed today, Marcus said with a smile, brushing her curls from her face. Mom, Grandma dropped her off early. Sadie turned to Caroline. You're here. Caroline smiled. So are you. The little girl beamed, then reached into her backpack. I made another one. She pulled out a folded piece of paper with glitter glue still drying at the edges. It showed Caroline in her chair, this time with a cape and stars surrounding her. You gave me a cape now? Caroline asked. Yeah, Sadie said proudly, because you save people. Who did I save? Sadie shrugged. I dunno, maybe Daddy. Caroline's heart caught. She glanced at Marcus, who was looking at the floor, his smile tight, eyes a little too shiny. Well, Caroline said, her voice catching slightly. I'll treasure it. Want to have lunch with us? Sadie asked. Daddy said we're going to the diner with the big windows. Sadie, Marcus warned gently. Caroline looked at them both. She felt the warmth of the invitation and the hesitation behind it. She could see Marcus's thoughts racing behind his eyes. The risk of crossing lines. The vulnerability of letting something unfamiliar into their small, carefully managed world. And yet, I'd love to, Caroline said. Sadie clapped. Yay, you can sit by the window. It's your throne. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck. You sure? Caroline said honestly. But I think it's time I started saying yes more. And then, from across the lobby, Reed emerged from the elevators. He stopped mid-stride when he saw them, Caroline with a child's drawing in hand, Sadie chattering at her side, Marcus watching them both. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened. He didn't speak, but the judgment was clear. He turned and walked past without a word, disappearing through the glass doors into the street. Caroline's shoulders stiffened. Marcus noticed. Everything okay? She nodded, but her smile had slipped. Do you need to go after him? He asked gently. She looked out toward the street, then down at Sadie, who was now drawing invisible hearts on the tile with her sneaker. No, she said, and for the first time in a long time, she meant it. The bell above the diner door jingled as Caroline wheeled inside, greeted by the smell of grilled onions, fresh coffee, and something warm that had nothing to do with food. The place was modest, chrome-rimmed stools, checkered floors, windows that stretched high and wide across the front wall. A slice of old Charlotte tucked between high-rises and bank towers. Marcus and Sadie were already at a booth by the window, menus open but forgotten as they watched pigeons strut on the sidewalk outside. Sadie saw Caroline first and waved both arms. "Your throne is waiting," she announced with a grin that could soften the hardest day. Caroline smiled and rolled over. "Should I have worn a crown?" Sadie giggled. "You wore confidence, same thing." Marcus looked up then, and for the briefest second, something unspoken passed between them. Acknowledgement. A thread of trust beginning to tug at its first stitch. "You made it," he said, sliding her a menu. "I said I would," she replied. Their eyes met again, and held. Lunch was easy, shockingly so. They talked about cartoons and favorite colors and whether pancakes should be eaten only in the morning. Sadie insisted they were a 24/7 food. Marcus shared a story about Sadie pouring syrup into his shoes when she was 4. Caroline hadn't laughed like that in years. The real kind, not the social kind. As the plates were cleared, Sadie excused herself to the bathroom. Marcus leaned back, folding his napkin. "She likes you," he said, casual but weighted. Caroline looked down at the table, tracing the condensation ring left by her glass. "She's easy to like." Marcus studied her for a beat. "You're not used to this, are you?" She glanced at him. "Lunch?" "No. This. People seeing past the surface." She opened her mouth, then closed it. He nodded slowly. "I didn't mean to overstep." "No," she said, her voice quiet. "You're not wrong." She looked out the window. "Since the accident, most people treat me like a project. Something to navigate, or worse, something to admire from a safe distance." Marcus leaned in slightly. "What do you wish they saw?" "Me." The word landed heavy. "Bare." "True. I know what that feels like," he said. "Different reasons. Same isolation." Caroline looked at him. "What happened, Marcus? Before this? You talk like someone who's lived 2 lives." He hesitated, then answered without flinching. "My wife, Elena, passed 5 years ago. Cancer. Fast. Cruel. Sadie was 3. A silence fell between them, not awkward, just thick with memory. "I was working investment strategy at the time," he continued, "making good money, big future, long hours. And then, the only thing that mattered was getting home before Sadie went to bed." Caroline's expression softened. "So you walked away." "I traded it in for something that made more sense. Janitor work gave me presence, gave her stability." "That's unusual," he offered, with a small smile. "Extraordinary." Marcus looked at her, not like a man trying to impress, but like a man tired of wearing armor. "Elena told me, in one of her last letters, 'Don't let grief raise our daughter alone.'" Caroline blinked. "She wrote you letters?" "Dozens. For every milestone. First day of school. First breakup. My birthday. Sadie's high school graduation." "That's love," she whispered. "That's faith," he replied. They both turned as Sadie came bouncing back, dragging her tiny backpack across the floor. "Did you know the soap in there smells like lemons and clouds?" Caroline smiled. "Sounds magical." Marcus tapped his watch. "We should head back. I've got supply runs." Sadie looked disappointed. "Hey," Caroline said gently. "You can always draw me another superhero. I'm pretty sure I need a sidekick." Sadie's eyes lit up. "Yes, I'll give you a pet dragon named Sparkle." Perfect. Outside, the sun was climbing higher, the city buzzing louder. Caroline waited as Marcus buckled Sadie into the back seat of their old but spotless sedan. He shut the door, then turned back to her. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" for showing up, for letting her in. Caroline inhaled slowly, the warm air brushing her skin. It's not just her. He gave a quiet nod. A few steps away, Reed stood under the shadow of the parking deck, watching them. He didn't move, just observed, arms crossed, mouth tight. Later that night, Marcus stood in the kitchen, watching Sadie color while spaghetti simmered on the stove. Loretta entered quietly, placing her purse on the counter. "She had a good day?" she asked, nodding toward Sadie. "Great day." Loretta leaned in. "She's been talking about that woman, Caroline." "Yeah, she's the one in the chair." Marcus turned. "She's the one who listens, the one who laughs at Sadie's jokes, the one who makes her feel important." "I'm not saying she's not kind," Loretta said carefully. "I just worry." "I know. She's powerful, beautiful. You think she'll still come around when things get hard?" "She already has," he replied. Loretta's voice dropped lower. "I just don't want Sadie to get attached and lose someone again. She's still healing." "We all are," Marcus said. "But maybe healing looks like letting love in, not pushing it away." Loretta didn't reply. But her silence wasn't disapproval, it was fear. Quiet and familiar. And Marcus understood that fear all too well. That night, Caroline sat in her penthouse, staring at the drawing Sadie had handed her in the diner. Her wheelchair had glitter wheels, a cape, and a heart glowing in the center of her chest. For the first time, Caroline saw herself not as someone broken, but as someone seen, really seen. She picked up her phone, then set it down, then picked it up again, and typed, "Today was good. Thank you." She hovered over Marcus's contact, then hit send. 1 minute later, a reply appeared. "You deserve good days, Caroline." "Maybe we all do." The late afternoon light spilled across the floor of Caroline's office, painting golden streaks across her marble desk. Her phone sat next to her untouched coffee, screen still glowing from Marcus's last message. "You deserve good days, Caroline. Maybe we all do." She read it again, slowly, like it held more meaning than the words themselves. Because it did. In a world where most people handled her like fragile glass, or worse, like a charity project, Marcus had offered her something rare: normalcy and honesty. She closed her laptop and rolled to the window, gazing out at the downtown skyline. Below, life buzzed, cars crawling through traffic, people rushing toward purpose. But here, in this room, time felt still, until Janelle walked in, breaking the silence with her usual briskness. "I've got the final quarter draft, but Reed said he wants to meet before we circulate it to the board." Caroline turned, eyes narrowing slightly. "Did he say why?" "He's worried about your messaging around the equity fund launch. Thinks the language is too soft." Caroline's voice dropped a degree. "Soft?" Janelle nodded carefully. "His word, not mine." Caroline's jaw tightened. "Set the meeting. Today. I'm done letting him edit my tone." Janelle lingered. "Everything okay?" Caroline gave her a faint smile. "It's getting there." The conference room was cold, chilled, not just by overactive AC, but by the undercurrent of tension that had followed Reed since the diner. He stood when Caroline rolled in. "Caroline." "Reed." She parked herself at the head of the table, resting her hands in her lap. "Let's talk about your concerns." Reed sat again, flipping through the printed report. "Your new messaging implies a shift in values. You're highlighting small business growth, community reinvestment. It's a little outside our brand voice." "It's not outside my voice," she said evenly. "It's a direction I believe in." He leaned forward. "You're the CEO, not a philanthropist. I'm both, and the fund is mine to shape." Reed exhaled. "I'm just trying to protect your credibility." "From what, exactly?" she asked. "From being seen as a woman who believes in more than margins?" Reed's expression tightened. "From being distracted?" The word dropped like a stone. Caroline's eyes sharpened. "Say what you mean, Reed." He folded his hands. People are talking. About Marcus Hayes. About your lunches. Your visible closeness. A silence stretched across the room. Cold, cracking. Caroline spoke slowly. And what exactly are they saying? Reed looked away. That you're letting personal entanglements blur professional judgment. You mean you're saying that? I'm not the only one. You're the only one saying it to my face. Reed finally met her gaze. You've worked too hard to build this company. I watched you fight for respect after the accident. Don't throw it away on someone who doesn't belong in your world. The temperature in the room dropped. Caroline's voice was quiet, but every syllable cut clean. You think I fought to walk back into a world that decides who's worthy of love based on their job title? Reed's jaw tightened. I don't need your approval, she added. Or your protection. She pushed back from the table. Meeting's over. That evening, Caroline sat in her car outside the rec center where Marcus and Sadie were finishing up an art class. The sun had started to dip, casting everything in amber light. She hadn't told him she was coming, hadn't even planned to. But her hands had gripped the wheel and steered here like they had a will of their own. The glass doors opened, and Sadie bounded out first, hair bouncing, cheeks flushed. Then Marcus followed, carrying her paint-covered backpack and laughing at something she said. Caroline rolled her window down slightly. Sadie spotted her first. Caroline, she squealed, racing over. Marcus looked up, surprised, but smiling as he walked over beside her. You spying on us now? He teased gently. I was in the area. Sadie climbed onto the curb and held up a dripping piece of paper. Look, I made a painting of you and Sparkle. The dragon again. This time, it had wings made of clouds and trailed glittery fire behind it. Caroline chuckled. Sparkle is becoming a franchise. She's getting a sidekick next week. Probably a squirrel. Ambitious. Marcus smiled, but studied Caroline's face carefully. You okay? Her smile faltered. I had a conversation today, she said slowly, with Reed. Ah. He thinks I'm making a mistake. Marcus's smile faded. Because of me? Because of what he thinks you represent? Marcus nodded, expression unreadable. And what do you think I represent? She paused, then spoke the words like an answer she'd waited too long to say. Honesty. Peace. The one person who didn't flinch when he saw me. The first person in a long time who didn't make me feel like I was a before and after story. Marcus swallowed. That's a lot to represent, he said softly. She looked at him. Can you carry it? He stepped closer. Sadie had already skipped toward the car, giving them a pocket of privacy in the slow, golden dusk. I don't want to be a headline in your life, Caroline. I don't want to be the story people whisper about. Then be the one I remember. His hand brushed hers lightly. Not possessive, not dramatic, just real. You're not a mistake, he said, and I won't let anyone reduce what this is. Caroline blinked against the sudden swell behind her eyes. Then she whispered, Then let's find out what it could be. He nodded once, and in the quiet that followed, the noise of the world faded just enough for both of them to breathe. It was a Sunday morning, drenched in soft light, the kind that made everything feel gentler than it was. Caroline sat on the edge of the community garden bed at the Whitaker Foundation campus, technically her own initiative, though she'd never once had her hands in the dirt. Until now, Marcus knelt across from her, sleeves rolled up, hands already deep in soil. He handed her a small trowel. You ever plant anything before? She smirked. I once kept a succulent alive for 6 months. That count? He tilted his head. Partial credit. Beside them, Sadie tugged on gardening gloves, far too big for her fingers. She plopped down between them with a dramatic sigh. I'm gonna grow strawberries and name them. Caroline raised a brow. You name your strawberries? Duh. You think I'm just gonna eat 'em without saying goodbye? Marcus laughed, and Caroline felt the sound ripple through her like sunlight. There was something different about him this morning, softer around the edges, like the weekend brought out a part of him that weekdays couldn't reach. She watched him guide Sadie's tiny fingers through the soil, teaching her how to gently cradle the roots. His voice was low and patient. Steady. It struck Caroline how little of that she'd had in her own life. People around her were usually loud, fast, transactional. Even her relationships brief, polished, calculated. But this was intentional, and it shook her in a way she hadn't prepared for. "You've done this before," she said after a while. Marcus looked up. "The garden? Life. With someone." His gaze met hers, unguarded. "Yeah, I have." "Do you miss it?" she asked quietly. He sat back on his heels, brushing dirt off his jeans. "Every day. But I've learned something." "What's that?" "You don't get the same love twice. The next one, if you're lucky, comes different. Not to replace, but to reveal." She looked down at her hands. "And what do I reveal?" "That you've been surviving when you deserve to be living." That hit harder than she wanted it to. Her throat tightened, eyes stinging. She turned her face slightly, pretending to adjust her chair. Sadie piped up. "Caroline, want to plant a flower next to mine so they can be friends?" Caroline cleared her throat. "I'd like that." They worked in silence for a while. A good silence. The kind that wrapped around you like a warm blanket. But it didn't last. Because just as Sadie leaned over to press a seed into the dirt, a familiar voice cut through the air behind them. "Well, this is unexpected." Caroline froze. She didn't have to turn to know who it was. Reed. She turned slowly, meeting his narrowed eyes. He was dressed in weekend casual, crisp button-down, no tie, but still managed to radiate disapproval. "What are you doing here?" she asked evenly. "I had a meeting with the foundation team," Reed said. "Didn't expect to find the CEO elbows deep in compost with her janitor and his daughter." Marcus stood up beside her, calm but steady. Caroline's voice chilled. "You're out of line." Reed ignored her, looking directly at Marcus. "You enjoying the proximity perks?" Marcus didn't flinch. "I'm enjoying the company." Sadie looked between them, sensing the tension but not understanding the weight of it. Caroline moved slightly in front of her. "This isn't your business, Reed. You're making it everyone's business. You show up at board meetings distracted. You ignore legal counsel. You're emotionally entangled in a situation that compromises your leadership." She narrowed her eyes. "You mean I'm happy? I mean you're being reckless. And I mean—" Marcus interrupted, voice firm but respectful, "that you're talking about a human being like she's a liability." Reed turned toward him, fire barely hidden behind his smile. "And you're forgetting your place." Silence fell like a dropped glass. Sadie's lip trembled. "Daddy?" Marcus knelt beside her. "It's okay, baby." Caroline turned her full attention to Reed, voice low and cutting. "You don't get to talk to him like that. Not here. Not ever. If you're so worried about my image, maybe worry less about who I eat lunch with and more about how your condescension is rotting our values from the inside out." Reed didn't respond. He just looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, there was something other than frustration in his eyes. It was fear, not of Marcus, not even of Caroline's decisions, but of losing control. She turned away from him, placing a hand on Marcus's arm. "Come on, let's finish what we started." They sat back down beside Sadie, who leaned gently against Caroline's side as they planted a new flower blue, wild, stubbornly blooming. Reed watched them for a moment longer, then walked away. No goodbyes, no final word, just the sound of his footsteps fading into the grass. Caroline's breath came slow and shaky. Marcus looked over at her, concern flickering in his eyes. "You okay?" She forced a smile. "Ask me again tomorrow." But even as she said it, she knew. Tomorrow, for once, didn't scare her anymore. Caroline stood at the sink in her penthouse kitchen, watching the steam rise from the kettle. The glass walls behind her showed the Charlotte skyline painted in a wash of sunset gold. But her eyes weren't on the view. They were on her phone, sitting face down on the counter. She hadn't heard from Marcus since the garden. Not a word, not a message, not even a joke from Sadie. She told herself not to overthink it. Maybe he was giving her space after the scene with Reed. Maybe he thought she needed time to cool off, to think. But the silence wrapped around her like a tight scarf, uncomfortable, unwelcome. The kettle clicked off. Still nothing. She poured the hot water slowly into her mug and glanced at the clock. Then, unable to stop herself, she picked up her phone and typed a message. "Hey, just wanted to check in. Hope Sadie's doing okay." She hovered over the send button, then deleted it, then typed again. "I can't stop thinking about Sunday. You okay?" Another pause, then finally, she sent it. And waited. 10 minutes. Nothing. She set the phone down, a pit slowly forming in her stomach. Marcus sat in his truck outside the grocery store, staring at Caroline's message on his screen. Sadie was in the back seat, humming to herself, working on yet another drawing. A rainbow this time, with 3 stick figures underneath it. The silence from him hadn't been an accident. He needed to think, to breathe, because that moment in the garden, Reed's words, Caroline's defense, Sadie's confusion, it had shaken something loose inside him. It wasn't fear of Caroline. It was fear of what being with her meant. He wasn't intimidated by her status, not anymore, but he knew how the world worked. He'd lived enough of it to understand what people said when powerful women loved men with less. He'd seen what judgment looked like in action. And Sadie, she deserved a peaceful life, a steady one. Not whispers and stares, but the way Caroline looked at him, like he wasn't invisible, like he mattered. It scared him more than it should have. He closed his phone without replying. Not yet. The next morning, Caroline rolled into the building lobby earlier than usual, her gaze instinctively sweeping the marble floors. No Marcus, only another janitor she didn't recognize, pushing a cart toward the service elevator. She nodded politely and kept moving, chest tight. When she reached her office, Janelle was already there, organizing documents. "You've got a media taping this afternoon," she said, flipping through papers. "The team wants to go over talking points." Caroline nodded absently. Janelle paused, watching her carefully. "Everything okay?" Caroline tried to smile. "Just didn't sleep well." Janelle tilted her head. "Marcus?" Caroline didn't answer. Janelle sighed and sat on the edge of the desk. "Look, I don't know everything about what's going on between you two, but I've seen more life in your eyes the past 2 weeks than in the last 2 years combined." Caroline stared at her. "Just don't let silence make decisions you haven't made yet," Janelle added. Caroline's voice was quiet. "What if he's pulling away? Then ask him why. Don't fill in the blanks with your worst fear." That night, Marcus stood outside his own front door, hands full of grocery bags. Sadie had run ahead, bouncing inside with her drawing before he could even turn the key. He stepped in slowly, heart heavier than it should be. Loretta stood at the kitchen counter, arms folded. "Sadie says you didn't take her to the garden today." Marcus nodded. "I needed a day." She watched him closely. "You haven't mentioned Caroline lately." He shrugged. "Nothing to mention." Loretta's expression didn't change. "You're pulling back. She's got enough to carry without my baggage." "She didn't seem to think you were baggage when she stood up for you in that garden." He opened the fridge, putting groceries away slowly. "I don't want Sadie to get caught in something that falls apart." "She already is," Loretta said gently. "She asks about Caroline every night. You think pulling back protects her, but silence is just another kind of wound." Marcus turned to face her. "I'm scared," he said finally, "of being too much, or not enough." Loretta stepped forward. "Then tell her that. Don't run from something that might be good just because it's unfamiliar." He looked down, nodding slightly. "She sent a message today," he murmured. I didn't answer. Then you know what you need to do. That same night, Caroline was alone in the boardroom, staring at the city lights. Her laptop was open, papers scattered, but none of it held her focus. The silence had stretched into something sharp now. Then, finally, her phone buzzed. She grabbed it instantly. Marcus, I've been quiet. Not because I don't care. Because I care too much and don't want to mess this up. Can we talk? Her breath caught. She typed back without hesitation. Yes. When? Marcus. Now. Front lobby. Her heart leapt. She turned and wheeled quickly to the elevator, pressing the button with shaking fingers. When the doors opened to the lobby, her eyes found him instantly. He stood just inside the glass doors, holding something in his hand. As she approached, he stepped forward, lifting a small white envelope. "What's that?" she asked. "A letter," he said, voice soft. "I wrote it before I ever met you. To myself. A reminder to never shut out the world just because it scared me." He handed it to her. She opened it slowly. Inside were just 6 words. "Let yourself be chosen, not chased." Caroline looked up at him, eyes brimming. "I'm here," he said. "If you still want this." She nodded, voice breaking. I never stopped. The rain had started soft, just a mist skimming over the glass windows of the Whitaker Foundation building. But by mid-morning, it had grown into a steady rhythm, tapping out a kind of nervous drumbeat that echoed across the city. Inside Caroline's office, the storm blurred the skyline, giving the city an almost dreamlike haze. But there was no haze in her mind. She sat at her desk, eyes on the letter Marcus had given her the night before, fingers tracing the edge of the paper like it held some kind of secret power. "Let yourself be chosen, not chased." She whispered the words aloud, letting them settle in the air. It wasn't just about romance. It was about belonging, about being wanted not for what she could give, or what she'd built, or the power she wielded, but for who she was beneath all of it. And for the first time in a very long time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, that was possible. There was a knock on the door. "Come in," she called, her voice steadier than she felt. Janelle stepped in, tablet in hand, face unreadable. "Your meeting with the finance board is at 11, and Reed's asked for a closed-door conversation afterward." Caroline looked up. "About?" He didn't say, but I'd be ready for another performance review in disguise. Caroline gave a small, dry smile. "He's relentless." Janelle hesitated, then crossed to the desk. "Caroline, you've been more alive these past few weeks than I've ever seen you. Don't let him dull that." Caroline blinked. "You think I've changed?" Janelle nodded. "Not changed, you've softened. But in a way that makes you stronger." There was a pause between them. "Thank you," Caroline said softly. Janelle nodded and left the room, closing the door gently behind her. By early afternoon, the boardroom was packed. Reed sat 3 chairs down from Caroline, his expression unreadable but his posture precise. Caroline delivered her quarterly updates with poise, detailing the firm's steady growth, the reinvestment plan for minority-owned businesses, and the expansion of their small-town outreach pilot. The room was quiet for a beat after she finished, then slow nods. A few murmured, "Impressives." Even Reed didn't object, though the set of his jaw said plenty. The meeting adjourned, and as everyone filtered out, Reed stayed behind. She didn't look at him until they were the only 2 left. "You wanted to talk," she said. He stepped forward, closing the door fully. "I've been with this company since its inception," he began. "I've fought alongside you, believed in your vision, and I've respected every decision until now." She sat back in her chair, unflinching. "You're dating a man who works on our janitorial team. You've made no effort to keep it private, and you expect the board to look past that." She kept her voice even. "I expect the board to look at my leadership, not my personal life." He shook his head. "This is about perception, Caroline. Influence, optics. You know how fragile trust can be when you're a woman in power." especially after the accident? She cut in. He didn't answer. Her eyes sharpened. You're not worried about perception, Reed. You're worried I'm no longer the version of myself you could control. That's not fair. No, she said quietly. What's not fair is that I spent the last 3 years proving I still belonged in this seat, and the moment I let myself feel something again, you treat it like a weakness. Reed stepped closer, his voice lower now. He can't walk your world, Caroline. Not really. You know it. She held his gaze. He doesn't have to walk it. He just has to stand with me, and he does that better than anyone else ever has. Reed didn't reply. He looked at her, something shifting behind his eyes. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. Caroline sat alone in the room, chest rising and falling, not with fear, but with finality. That night, she found herself in Marcus's driveway, rain still pattering against her windshield. The porch light was on, and through the window, she saw Sadie bouncing through the living room in superhero pajamas, a cape trailing behind her. Marcus opened the door before she could even knock. I was hoping you'd come, he said. I didn't want to wait anymore, she replied. He stepped aside, and she rolled in, shaking the rain from her shoulders. Sadie spotted her instantly and shrieked, "Sparkle's back!" Caroline laughed as Sadie ran over and wrapped her arms around her neck. Marcus watched quietly, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. After Sadie ran off to finish her cartoon, he turned to Caroline. How was your day? She looked at him, really looked. I stood my ground. He nodded slowly. And it felt good. He moved a little closer. You're still standing it now? She met his gaze. Only because I know you're beside me. A beat passed. Then Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny, crumpled square of paper. Caroline raised a brow. He unfolded it and held it up. A drawing. Sadie's, of course. This time it was a heart. Not red, not pink, but orange and blue like the sky just before dusk. She made it last night, he said. Told me to give it to you the next time you looked sad. Caroline stared at it, throat tightening. I'm not sad, she whispered. I know, he said. But I wanted to give it to you anyway, just in case you forget. She took it gently. I don't think I will, she said. Not this time. Outside, the rain slowed. Inside, something else began. Caroline hadn't been in a church since her mother's funeral. Not because she didn't believe, but because silence in those kinds of spaces made her feel too many things at once: grief, longing, the constant ache of everything she'd had to grow through just to survive. So when Marcus invited her and Sadie to come to a small community fundraiser at Reverend Darrell's church, she almost said no. Almost. But it was Sadie who had convinced her, proudly announcing in the back seat, I'm helping set up the cupcake table. And Reverend Darrell said I can be in charge of the sprinkles. Caroline smiled and nodded. Sprinkle Queen. Got it. Now, wheeling across the church's fellowship hall, she felt the weight of unfamiliar eyes and familiar doubt pressing at her chest like fog. People didn't say anything out loud, but she could feel their questions, their calculations, her designer blazer, her wheels, her being here at all. And yet... Then she saw Marcus standing across the room, sleeves rolled, laughing with Darrell as they lifted folding chairs into place. His entire posture shifted when he spotted her. He moved toward her without hesitation. Not like a man crossing a room, but like a man returning to something that grounded him. I was starting to think you'd bail, he said, voice warm, steady. I almost did, she admitted. But then I remembered Sadie's in charge of sprinkles. Wouldn't want to miss that. He grinned. You sure you're okay? She looked around. Not completely, but I'm here. He offered his hand, and she took it without thinking. Then that's enough for me. The fundraiser was modest, homemade food, hand-lettered signs, paper hearts taped to the walls, but the energy in the room was vibrant. Real. Sadie zipped around with her sprinkle shaker, carefully dusting cupcakes like they were sacred relics. Every few minutes, she'd glance over to make sure Caroline was still there, and every time Caroline would give a thumbs up or a wink, it felt strangely good, until Loretta appeared. She approached from the left, holding a clipboard and wearing a neutral expression that didn't match the tension suddenly thick in the air. "Caroline," she said politely. "I didn't expect to see you here." Caroline smiled. "That makes two of us." Loretta's gaze flicked to Marcus, who had just stepped away to help a teenager stack chairs. "He invited you?" Caroline nodded. "He did." Loretta hesitated, then spoke softly. "You know he's trying. You've brought something out of him, something he hasn't allowed himself to be in a long time." Caroline waited. "But you need to know this isn't just about him," Loretta continued. "Sadie, she's had enough upheaval. I would never hurt her." "I don't think you would," Loretta said. "But that doesn't mean she won't get hurt." Caroline's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice level. "What exactly are you warning me about?" Loretta sighed, visibly searching for the right words. "Kids see things before adults admit them. She's already attached to you, Caroline, and if this ends, it won't just be Marcus picking up the pieces." Caroline looked toward the cupcake table, where Sadie had just handed a perfectly sprinkled masterpiece to a delighted little boy. "I know that," she said quietly. Loretta looked at her for a long moment. "Then be sure," she said. "Be very sure." Later, as the evening wrapped and people began filing out into the cooling southern dusk, Caroline found herself beside Marcus again, this time leaning against the low railing of the church ramp, while Sadie ran through the grass chasing fireflies. He watched her, pride glowing in his face like soft lantern light. Caroline spoke first. Loretta pulled me aside. Marcus's shoulders stiffened. "Yeah?" "She's worried. About Sadie. About me. She means well," he said carefully. "She's just seen what it looks like when things fall apart." "And have they?" Caroline asked. "Fallen apart for you?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Not all at once. But piece by piece, yeah." She looked down. "I didn't come here tonight expecting a confrontation. But you knew it was possible," he said. "And you came anyway." "I didn't come for confrontation. I came for you." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was sacred. Then Caroline added, "Marcus, if this is going to work, I need to be sure we're not avoiding the hard stuff just because the soft parts feel good." He looked at her. "You mean read, Loretta? The board? The world?" "I mean all of it. We can't pretend it's not there. But we can't let it write the ending either." Marcus exhaled slowly, then stepped closer until he was just beside her. "I'm not running," he said. She looked at him. "Even if people say you don't belong in my world, I'm not trying to belong in your world," he said. "I'm asking you to build one with me, one that's ours." Caroline blinked, tears threatening behind her lashes. "I don't want you to build around me," she whispered. "I won't. I'll build with you." Behind them, Sadie called out, waving a jar of glowing fireflies in the air like a trophy. Caroline turned to look, smiling through the blur of emotion. "We should probably help her let them go," Marcus said. Caroline nodded. "Yeah, letting go isn't always bad." "No," he agreed. "Sometimes it's how we make room for something better." And together, they walked across the grass, step by step, toward the little girl holding light in her hands. The gala was held in one of Charlotte's historic museums, a grand hall with polished wood floors, crystal chandeliers, and walls lined with decades of carefully curated art. Caroline arrived in her wheelchair, her gown sweeping the floor in soft folds of emerald silk. The light bounced off her hair, off the polished metal of her chair, catching everyone's attention even before she moved through the room. Marcus waited near the side entrance, suit jacket slightly open, tie loosened, just enough to make him look casual but not careless. His presence was quiet, understated, yet somehow commanding without effort. Sadie clutched his hand, practically vibrating with excitement in her glittering dress, whispering about the hors d'oeuvres. Caroline paused just inside the hall, taking a deep breath. The chatter, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, it all felt like a different world from the quiet mornings in the lobby, from the soft rain and small smiles that had first drawn her to him. And yet, standing there, she felt that same tug in her chest, that same curiosity about what might happen next. "Shall we?" Marcus asked, offering his arm. She took it, not out of necessity but because she wanted to be beside him. They moved through the room, exchanging polite nods and smiles with acquaintances, board members, and local dignitaries. Caroline could feel the eyes curious, skeptical, some admiring, but she kept her focus on Marcus and Sadie, letting the rest blur around them. Eventually, they reached the center of the hall where a small dance floor had been cleared. Music began soft, inviting, the kind that demanded you notice it. Marcus glanced at her. "May I?" he asked. Caroline raised an eyebrow. "In front of everyone?" "I promise not to step on your cape," he said, nodding toward her dress. She laughed softly. "You're bold." "And you are magnificent," he said, lowering his voice. Just enough so only she could hear. She felt heat rise in her chest and nodded, allowing him to guide her toward the dance floor. She settled into her wheelchair, arms resting lightly on the wheels. He stepped close, hands at her waist, eyes locking with hers. And then, gently, he drew her into motion with the music. For a moment, nothing else existed. The chatter, the judging glances, the weight of expectations, all of it melted away. There was only him, only her, only the rhythm between them. Caroline felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't allowed herself in years, beating faster than she wanted it to, but in the best possible way. "Beautiful," Marcus whispered. "Not me," she murmured. "You." He shook his head. "You're the one in front of everyone. You're brilliant, strong, irresistible." Her throat tightened. "Marcus, I mean it," he said, "and I hope someday you'll let yourself see it too. Not just in a mirror or a boardroom, but in the way I see you. Always." A part of her wanted to melt into that space, wanted to abandon caution entirely. But another part, the one Reed had fed, the one Loretta had cautioned against, whispered warnings. Public scrutiny, vulnerability, scandal in subtle whispers. Even though she had never cared about superficial gossip before, she couldn't ignore it entirely now. Before she could answer, a familiar voice came from the side. Caroline Whitaker. She froze, heart skipping. "Reed." He stood by the buffet, watching, not sneering this time, but a thinly veiled tension threaded through his posture. His eyes met hers for a moment, a silent challenge, a wordless warning. Marcus stiffened slightly beside her. "Ignore him," he murmured. She shook her head minutely. "I can't." The music continued, almost mocking in its persistence. Reed took a step closer. This display," he said, voice low but audible. "It's unwise." Caroline's hands gripped the wheels lightly, her knuckles whitening. "Unwise?" she repeated. "Or inconvenient for you?" Reed's jaw clenched. "You know exactly what I mean." Her lips pressed together. "I know exactly what I feel, Reed. And right now, I feel free. Even in this chaos. Even in this gaze of judgment." Her voice rose, carrying over the music just enough to make heads turn. "And I refuse to let you dictate how I live or whom I love." Marcus's hand tightened over hers instinctively, grounding her. Sadie peeked over at them from the side, eyes wide, sensing the tension. Reed's gaze softened just a fraction, not because he approved, but because he understood. And in that fraction, Caroline felt a sense of power she hadn't expected. Control wasn't about compliance. It was about choosing her own path despite interference. The music shifted to a slow waltz. Marcus leaned closer, whispering, "Do you trust me?" "Yes," she breathed. No hesitation, no second guessing. He guided her in a gentle circle, following the rhythm, drawing her into him fully. The room blurred. The chandeliers, the polished floors, the guests' curious glances all faded behind the pulse of their closeness. And then, something shifted entirely. Caroline realized she wasn't worried about Reed anymore, not the board, not the scrutiny, not even her own past fears. All that mattered was the movement, the warmth, the connection that defied the expectations she had learned to live with. "I don't want to hide anymore," she whispered, resting her forehead against his chest for a fraction of a second. "Not from anyone." Marcus smiled softly. "You don't have to. Not with me. Not with Sadie. Not with the people who matter." The song ended, leaving an echo in the room. They stood together, breathless, hands still linked, surrounded by a room full of observers who, for the first time, might have seen Caroline not as a figurehead, not as a CEO, not as someone to be judged, but as someone alive, radiant, undeniable. Sadie ran up, cheeks flushed, and tugged at Caroline's hand. "You did it, Caroline. You spun like a superhero." Caroline laughed, letting herself be pulled into the child's excitement. Marcus leaned down, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I think you were the superhero tonight," he said softly, meeting her eyes again. "Not me. Not anyone else. You." Caroline's chest tightened, warmth spilling through her in a way that made the world feel suddenly right. Even Reed, standing at the edge of the room, couldn't diminish that. He could watch. He could assess. He could object. But he could not undo this moment. The moment she realized that choice, courage, and love were hers to embrace, and that she was no longer afraid to do so in full view of the world. Caroline sat at her desk, staring at the stack of unread emails, the soft hum of the air conditioning echoing like a metronome in the quiet office. The gala had passed, and the euphoria that had carried her through the evening now lingered only as a faint warmth, quickly giving way to a creeping unease she couldn't shake. Marcus hadn't called that morning, not even a message, and Sadie had been unusually quiet on the ride to school, the sparkle in her eyes dimmed just enough to make Caroline's chest tighten. She exhaled slowly, rubbing her temples. Maybe. No. The truth pressed against her like the humid Charlotte air outside the window. Something had shifted. Something subtle, but undeniable. The laughter they'd shared, the closeness she'd felt, it was gone today. She rolled her chair toward the lobby, hoping to catch him on his shift. Maybe a word, maybe an explanation. Anything. Marcus was there, polishing the brass railing with meticulous care, his movements slower than usual. When he saw her, he offered a small, tight smile. "Morning," she said cautiously. "Morning," he replied, voice clipped. The air between them felt dense, charged, and uncomfortable in a way it never had before. "Marcus," Caroline started, then paused. Words failed her for the first time in weeks. He didn't look at her. He focused on a stubborn smudge near the base of the elevator. "Caroline." "Wait. Don't," she said softly, urgency in her voice. "Don't tell me to give you space if you're going to vanish for a day without a word." He finally lifted his gaze. The brown of his eyes was clouded, hesitant, guarded. I don't know if I can do this right now." Her heart sank. "Do this? Marcus? Do what?" "Us," he whispered, almost to himself. "This being here, feeling." He trailed off, hands fumbling with the cloth. Caroline's chest tightened. She rolled closer to him. "Feeling what?" "That it's too much. That I'm not enough." The words hit her like ice water. She reached out, placing a hand over his. "Marcus, listen to me. You are enough. You've always been enough." He shook his head. "Not for her, not for Sadie, not for me to mess up. I care too much. Caring too much isn't a crime. she said, voice firm. It's what makes you human, and it's what made me fall for you. He looked at her then, eyes flickering with conflict. Caroline, I'm afraid that if I step too close, I'll ruin everything. I've seen how fragile this world can be for you, for us, for her. And I don't know if I can handle the weight of it. Caroline's throat tightened. You're not alone in carrying it. You never have to be. We can share it, all of it. He swallowed hard, gaze dropping to the floor. Silence stretched, heavy and painful. Marcus, she said softly, leaning closer. I don't care about the weight of the world. I care about you. And I care about what we're building. But you have to meet me halfway. I can't do this alone. He finally lifted his eyes, glistening with unshed emotion. I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to hurt Sadie. I've seen what disappointment can do, and I can't bear the thought of being the one responsible for it. Caroline's hand tightened over his. Then be brave. Just this once, Marcus. Take the leap with me. We'll figure out the rest together. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, his hand covered hers, fingers intertwining in a silent promise. I'm scared, he admitted, but I want to try. For you, for her, for us. Tears blurred Caroline's vision. She laughed softly, a sound half relief, half disbelief. That's all I needed to hear. He exhaled, shoulders relaxing slightly. You make it easier to breathe. And you make it easier to live, she replied. Sadie ran up then, skipping between them. Are we done being sad now? I think cupcakes will help. Caroline smiled, lifting the little girl into her lap. Cupcakes always help. Marcus crouched beside them, arms around both of them, creating a circle of warmth in the bustling lobby. The hum of people, the clatter of cleaning supplies, the distant sounds of traffic, all faded into background noise. And for the first time since the gala, everything felt aligned. Fragile. Yes. But possible. Real. Later, as they rolled toward the elevator, Caroline glanced up at Marcus. You realize this means no more running, right? I realize, he said, voice steady now. I'm done running. And I'm done pretending I need to carry it alone, she replied. They shared a look that held 1,000 unspoken promises. When the elevator doors closed, enclosing them in the soft hum of polished metal, it felt like the world outside had paused just for them. No judgment, no fear, just the pulse of two hearts, daring to step forward together. And in that moment, Caroline knew the hardest part was over. Not the conflict, not the challenges, not the whispers of Reed or Loretta or the board, but the distance between them. It was gone, and what remained was something worth everything. Caroline sat in her penthouse, the city lights outside a blurred constellation against the dark glass. Her wheelchair was pulled close to the window, but she didn't look at the skyline. She hadn't truly seen it for weeks, not with her mind swirling too fast to notice the gentle beauty of the city. On the kitchen counter lay a small envelope, its edges a little bent from handling. Sadie's handwriting, looping and uneven, told her exactly who it was from before she even picked it up. She tore it open carefully. Inside was a single sheet of construction paper, the kind that smelled faintly of crayons and glue. Sadie had drawn 3 figures: Caroline in her wheelchair, a little figure of Marcus kneeling beside her, and Sadie herself, arms outstretched like she was holding them together. Around them, stars twinkled, a sun beaming from the corner, and a small, smiling dragon hovering above them. At the bottom, in large, careful letters, were the words, "If it's the chair, I don't mind. I've got 2 legs. I'll push you to happy if I have to." Caroline felt a lump rise in her throat. Her hands trembled slightly as she traced the words with her finger, reading them over and over. The honesty of a child was so much sharper than any adult's measured caution, so much purer. She hadn't expected this. Sadie's words cut through layers of doubt she didn't even realize she was holding. And yet, along with the sweetness, There was a fear of attachment, of opening herself fully, of letting someone see her completely. Caroline's phone buzzed on the counter. She reached for it, unsure if she wanted to see the message. It was Marcus. "Are you okay? Did Sadie make you cry yet?" She smiled softly, holding the drawing closer. "Yes. She's brilliant. Just like her dad." She pressed send. "I'll be there soon. We need to talk." Her stomach tightened. She had been avoiding this, pretending that the world was stable enough, that they could continue in a bubble of laughter, art, and stolen moments. But the reality of it had crept in. Conflict wasn't coming from the outside. It had been waiting within, in the quiet spaces between them. A knock on the door pulled her from the swirl of thought. Marcus appeared, soaked from a sudden drizzle, jacket clinging slightly to his frame. His eyes found hers immediately. Concern, hesitation, and something else, an urgency that made her pulse quicken. "Caroline," he said, voice low. "I came as soon as I could." She gestured for him to come inside. I need to tell you something," she admitted. He stepped closer, cautious, but present. "Then say it." "I'm listening." She handed him the drawing. "Sadie made this. I think you should see it." Marcus took it, kneeling in front of her so they were eye level. He studied it carefully, lips pressed together. His hand reached out to cover hers. "She's incredible. You see that, right? How honest she is. How much love she's putting into this." "I do," Caroline whispered. "And it terrifies me." Marcus looked puzzled. "Terrifies you?" She nodded, eyes brimming. "Because it's real. Because she's invested in me. In us. And I'm afraid I'll mess it up. That I'll let someone down. That I'll fail her, you, myself." He shook his head. "You won't. You can't fail love that's already giving back. You've already made it stronger by showing up." Her lips trembled. "I feel like I've spent years proving I can survive alone. And now I'm supposed to let someone in? And you can," he said firmly. "Not alone, not without support. You're letting me in, Caroline. You've already trusted me with everything important. You've just been afraid to admit it." The words sank in slowly, like rain soaking dry soil. Caroline's eyes filled completely, her chest tight. She wanted to speak, to let everything tumble out. But the lump in her throat blocked her. Marcus leaned forward gently. "Caroline, look at me, please." She did. And in that moment, the tension, the fear, the restraint, all of it crashed into the room with her heartbeat. "I can't," she whispered, voice raw. "Not without knowing I won't ruin it. Not without knowing she'll be safe. Not without knowing you'll be okay with me." "I am," he said, voice unshakable. "And you will. We'll figure it out together, every step. No hiding, no pretending, just us." Caroline let herself exhale slowly. The air she had been holding in for weeks seemed to leave her body in one long, trembling release. "I want that," she said finally, "more than I've wanted anything in years." "And you'll have it," Marcus replied. "You just have to let go of the fear." They sat together in silence, hands still clasped, both of them letting the storm of emotion settle. Outside, rain continued to fall softly against the glass, a gentle reminder that even the heaviest storms eventually passed. Sadie's small footsteps echoed from the hallway. "Mom, Dad, look what I made next." Caroline smiled, wiping a stray tear from her cheek. "I think we need to see that together." Marcus grinned, lifting her hand and pressing a kiss to it. "Together," he said, and this time the word was a promise. Caroline looked at him, then at the drawing, then back at him again. And for the first time, the fear wasn't paralyzing, it was liberating. "I think we're going to be okay," she whispered. He squeezed her hand. "We already are." And in the soft glow of the penthouse, amidst crayons, drawings, and whispered promises, Caroline finally allowed herself to believe it, believe in love, in family, in hope, in the possibility that being chosen could be the bravest, most beautiful act of all. The late afternoon sun stretched across the quiet street, painting the front porch of Marcus's house in warm amber tones. Caroline's wheelchair rolled along the brick path, wheels crunching softly against the worn stones. She paused at the edge of the porch, breathing in the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine. For once, she wasn't thinking about board meetings or deadlines or the quiet judgments of strangers. She was here. She was present. Marcus opened the door before she could knock. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of her, not with surprise but with a warmth that made her heart tighten. Sadie had already spotted her and ran ahead, little feet thumping across the porch, hands outstretched. "Caroline!" she yelled. "I saved the best spot for you." Caroline laughed softly, lifting the little girl into her lap. "You did? And where is that?" Sadie pointed toward the old swing set in the backyard, its chains creaking gently in the breeze. "Right here. You get to push me." Marcus stepped forward, brushing his hands together. "I'll help too," he said, voice low, almost nervous. Caroline turned to him, reading the hesitation behind his otherwise calm demeanor. "You've been quiet today," she said softly. He met her gaze, exhaling slowly. "I've been thinking about everything, about us, about what it means to step into this fully, without hesitation." She felt her chest tighten. And I'm afraid," he admitted, voice almost a whisper. "Afraid that I'll let you down. Afraid that I'll disappoint Sadie. Afraid that my own fear will undo everything we've built." Caroline reached out, placing her hand over his. "Marcus, listen to me. You've already been brave. You've already been present. That's more than most people manage in a lifetime." He swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "But is it enough?" "It is," she said firmly. "Because you're willing. Because you're here. And because I trust you." Sadie tugged at Caroline's sleeve. "Push me, Caroline. Faster." Caroline smiled, letting the little girl slip down the swing and give her a running start. She pushed gently at first, feeling the wind brush against Sadie's hair, the laughter bubbling from her like a warm stream. Marcus watched them, leaning against the railing, eyes softening as the sunlight caught the highlights in his hair. After a while, Caroline let Sadie rest, climbing down to join Marcus at the railing. "You've been holding back," she said quietly, "and I can feel it. I don't want to ruin this," he said. "For you. For her." "You won't," Caroline replied, "but you have to stop letting the fear control you." He hesitated, then leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not just fear. It's respect. Respect for the life you've built, for the courage you carry every day, for the girl who trusts us both." Caroline reached out, taking both his hands in hers. "Marcus, I don't need to be saved. I don't need to be fixed. I just need to be seen. And right now, you're seeing me." His eyes glistened with emotion. "I'm scared, but I want to be here. Fully. No reservations. No pulling back." A silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, but charged. The kind of silence that carries 1,000 words without a single one spoken. Sadie ran past them, carrying a small bundle of wildflowers she had picked from the edge of the yard. "Here, for you two." Caroline took the flowers, pressing them gently to her chest. "Thank you, sweetie," she said. Marcus smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You know," he murmured, "I've spent so long protecting myself from things that could hurt me. And now, I think I understand that some of the best things in life are worth the risk." Caroline's eyes softened, tears pricking the corners. "Some of the best things," she whispered, "are worth the risk, and I'm ready." He leaned closer, careful, gentle, as if the world itself might shatter if he moved too quickly. "Then we take the leap," he said, "together." "Yes," she breathed, her hand resting over his heart. "Together." Sadie clapped her hands, breaking the moment with pure delight. "Yay! Now can we plant flowers?" Caroline laughed, letting go of the tension in her chest. "We can plant all the flowers you want." As they moved together toward the garden bed in the backyard, Caroline felt a lightness she hadn't known in years. Fear still lingered, whispering faintly at the edges of her consciousness, but it no longer dominated her. She had Marcus, she had Sadie, and she had herself finally whole in a way that didn't depend on perfection or control. Marcus took her hand as they approached the soil, guiding her gently to the best spot to plant beside Sadie. "You know," he said quietly, "there's no rush. We'll figure out the rest as we go. Every step, every choice, together." Caroline nodded, squeezing his hand. "Every step," she repeated. They knelt or wheeled themselves side by side, hands in the earth, hearts tethered by trust and the quiet courage it took to let themselves be vulnerable. And as the sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow across the backyard, Caroline realized that the turning point wasn't about confrontation or fear or even Reed's disapproval. It was this: choosing each other, choosing trust, choosing love. And that, she thought with a quiet, fierce certainty, was everything. The morning air was crisp, carrying a hint of spring through Charlotte's city streets. Caroline's wheelchair rolled across the wooden floor of the community park, polished and smooth beneath her wheels. Today wasn't about work or meetings or proving anything to the board. Today was about family, about love, and about the future they had chosen together. The small garden pavilion had been decorated with ribbons and flowers, vibrant yellows, soft pinks, and cheerful blues. It was simple, yet elegant. The kind of place that felt intimate and personal rather than flashy. Guests milled quietly around the pavilion. Friends, colleagues, neighbors, all smiling, all ready to celebrate. Sadie zipped between tables, her tiny dress catching the sunlight, cheeks flushed with excitement. "Mom, Dad, look at the flowers," she squealed, tugging at Caroline's hand. "They're all perfect." Caroline laughed, spinning her chair gently to face the little girl. "They're perfect because you helped, Pumpkin." Marcus emerged from behind the pavilion, adjusting the lapel of his jacket, though his eyes were fixed entirely on Caroline. The moment their gazes met, a silence seemed to settle over the room. It wasn't the kind of silence born of tension. It was the hush that comes when everything important has finally aligned. "Are you ready?" he asked, voice low, almost reverent. Caroline took a deep breath. She nodded, letting the wind tousle her hair. "I think I've been ready for a long time, just afraid to admit it." He smiled softly. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." The officiant stepped forward, welcoming everyone with warmth and gentle humor, the kind that made strangers feel like old friends. Caroline felt her pulse quicken as she rolled forward, the soft shuffle of her chair against the wooden floor marking the start of something permanent. Marcus stepped up beside her, reaching for her hand. His grip was firm but tender, grounding her. "Caroline Whitaker," the officiant began, "you have chosen to love openly, to trust fully, and to commit to a partnership that is equal in courage, respect, and joy. Do you take Marcus Hayes to be your partner, to share in all the triumphs and trials, and to create a family built on trust, laughter, and care?" "I do," Caroline said, voice steady, though her chest felt tight with emotion. Marcus squeezed her hand. "I do." Sadie clutched both of their hands, her own tiny fingers threading between theirs. "I do too," she exclaimed, eyes sparkling. A ripple of laughter spread through the guests, soft and warm, and Caroline felt tears prick at her eyes. Not tears of fear, not of doubt, but of relief, of joy, and of love realized. The officiant smiled. "Then by the power vested in me, and by the love you have chosen to share, I now pronounce you a family. You may celebrate this union with a kiss, Marcus leaned closer, and Caroline felt her heart lift. The kiss was gentle, affirming, a quiet declaration of everything they had fought for, everything they had survived, and everything they would face together. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't about appearances. It was real. Sadie clapped loudly, squealing, "Again! Again!" Caroline laughed, pulling Marcus toward the garden path lined with petals and sunlight. They wheeled slowly together, Sadie running alongside, the three of them perfectly in step. The world beyond the pavilion, the board, Reed, the whispers of judgment was muted, irrelevant. Later, as the reception began beneath strings of warm lights, Caroline watched Marcus kneel beside Sadie, helping her with a cupcake she had topped with way too many sprinkles. Caroline's eyes softened. This was more than love. This was life. It was messy, beautiful, unpredictable. It was worth every hesitation, every risk, every moment of courage that had brought them here. She leaned back in her chair, feeling the breeze, watching her daughter and her husband laugh together, and whispered to herself, "We made it." Marcus caught her gaze and smiled. "We did. Together." Caroline's eyes glistened. "And we'll keep making it. Every day." He nodded. "Every day." Sadie ran up to them again, waving a small bouquet she had picked from the pavilion. "For you, Mom. And you, Dad." Caroline took it, pressing the flowers to her chest. "Thank you, sweetheart. This is perfect." Marcus pulled her close, and she rested her head against his shoulder, the weight of years of isolation, fear, and struggle falling away. The sun dipped lower, casting golden light over the three of them, their shadows stretching across the garden like a single, unbroken line. Caroline thought about all the moments that had led here. The blind date that had gone wrong, the quiet kindness of a man she barely knew, the unwavering honesty of a little girl who saw her fully without hesitation. And she realized that life's greatest lessons weren't taught in boardrooms or in polished speeches. They were taught in courage, in trust, in choosing love despite fear. She looked at Marcus. "You know, I thought love was supposed to fix things." He shook his head gently. "It doesn't fix. It builds. It grows. And sometimes, it starts with someone brave enough to stay." Caroline smiled, the tears she had held back all these months finally spilling over. "Then we're building something extraordinary." And as the evening settled into a quiet rhythm of laughter, dancing, and celebration, Caroline knew that she had found more than love. She had found home in Marcus, in Sadie, and in herself. The world outside would always have challenges. It would always have expectations, doubts, and moments of fear. But inside this small circle of warmth, laughter, and devotion, there was certainty. There was courage, and above all, there was love that didn't need perfection, it only needed choice. Caroline pressed her hand over her heart, feeling the steady beat, and whispered softly, "We deserve this. All of it." Marcus leaned close, brushing a gentle kiss across her temple, and it's only the beginning. Sadie ran between them, spinning with the joy of the moment, and for a fleeting, perfect heartbeat, everything was exactly as it should be, complete, real, and unshakably theirs. In the soft glow of lantern light, surrounded by the people they loved and the life they had chosen, Caroline understood the deepest truth. Love was never about perfection. It was about being seen, being chosen, and being brave enough to stay. And in that moment, with Marcus and Sadie at her side, she knew they had all three.